One, two, three.
Mhm.
All right. Go. So here we are on another episode of this Small Firm Exchange interview series, and we have an amazing guest here, Jeremiah Russell. I'm gonna formally introduce you, but thank you for being here. Pleasure always connecting with you. Always, we've known each other for quite some time now, and I think we hit it off right away when we got to the SFX. But let me just go ahead and introduce you so that just in case people don't know who Jeremiah Russell is. So Jeremiah graduated from the Savannah College of Art and Design with a Master's of Architecture in 2003. From 2004 to 2014, he worked for way too many other architectural firms in Florida, Virginia, and Arkansas, gaining an incredible breadth of experience in aviation, retail, office, multifamily, historic preservation, and custom residential design. In 2014, he took the big leap and founded Rogue Architecture. Since then, his work and experience has continued to grow, specializing in custom single-family homes, multifamily and affordable housing, commercial, office, and retail, custom interiors, and historic preservation. In addition to being an NCARF certificate certified or certificate holder, Jeremiah is licensed in 14 states. Oof. Arkansas, California, Connecticut, Colorado, DC, Florida, Kansas, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, North Carolina, Oregon, Texas, and Virginia. Oh my goodness, a mouthful. And I think you got the New York one too. You're onto that one.
Not yet. I do plan on adding New York and Missouri within the next I don't know, probably before the end of this year.
Oh my gosh, and
Yeah.
I have known you, right? But I never read your bio before. So
It sounds so much more impressive when you read it out loud.
in the way you
When I
said
read
it,
it, I'm like, oh my
yeah, yeah. I'm
God.
like, sometimes I'm trying to, figure out the right balance, and I'm like, but you got me right there with so many firms that you worked for. I think it was a similar experience for me. But Jeremiah, let's bring our audience from the Small Firm Exchange, which is, just for context for everybody. We're board members of the Small Firm Exchange. You're gonna be the chair, actually, the elected chair for 2025. So firms of 0 to about 10 people is a small firm within the AIA. But tell me how do you get started? Like, you there work for way too many firms, but how do you take that big leap and tell us a little bit about that and walk us through that process? I'm sure a lot of other firms or people that are planning on starting their firm may want to know how do I do this? How do I go about it?
Sure. So it is a little bit of a long story, but the Reader's Digest version, as you said, I worked for a lot of firms before getting licensed and before branching out on my own. But it wasn't like a market condition. It wasn't an employment condition. It was intentional. I worked for a different firm every year for the first 5 years that I was in practice after I graduated college. And I did that intentionally because I wanted to gain very specific kinds of experience at different types of firms. And so I was lucky enough to start my career at KBJ Architects in Jacksonville, Florida, which is one of the oldest. It's I think the second oldest architectural firm in the state.
Hold on. I gotta stop you right here. So you're telling me that you, by design, decided to be at a firm for a year within the first 5 years. Like, you literally said, you know what, I'm gonna test this out, see what I learn, and then if I get the juices of what I want, I'm out. If I get it in 3 months, I'm out. If I get it in 6-8 months, I'm out. Like, it was a strategic. Did you plan to just be, and sorry guys, but a job whore to some extent? Like, do you just plan it?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't, especially in the profession, they really don't believe me when I say that. But no, it really was intentional. Because the goal for me has always been to be a leader in a firm, whether that was for a firm that promoted me to leadership, or, as is the actual case, a firm that I started. So, I never intended to be, and, this is not a disparaging remark, but I never intended to be just an employee. I never intended to just be a project architect, or or an associate, or a drafts person or something like that. I have always, since the day I started architecture school, wanted to be a principal, to be a business leader, to
Hmm.
be a business owner. That was always part of the plan. And so
And when you say
when I
that
started,
you didn't mean to kind of like make anybody else, I guess, feel bad about being,
yeah, no, no, no. I mean,
it's not
there's,
undermining it, because at the end of the day, I guess you and I both know that sometimes we wish we were just designing 24/7 and not dealing with
oh gosh,
invoices and calling
yeah.
clients and dealing with everything that goes wrong,
And
right?
and
Right.
employees and consultants and, regulatory
Sometimes
agencies and
the
the whole
grass,
myriad of,
yeah, the grass look
yeah.
greener on the other side, but you do know that, I mean, there are a lot of days, more sometimes than not, where I want to just be able to go to work from 9 a.m. to 5:30 and go home to my family, and my phone
Yep.
is off from work and I don't have to worry about it. So
Yeah.
there is a lot to be said about doing that very well. you know
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I think, that's the beauty of every industry, especially ours, the
Hmm.
AEC industry, is there's a position for everybody within the industry to do the very best that you can with what you're good at. I just happen to be very good at being a type A personality, wanting to own my own firm, lead my own firm, have employees, and do the work on my terms and on my schedule.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so that was always the plan. And so, in 2014, when I started my company, it was a little bit plan, and it was a lot, I think, uh, call it kismet or destiny or just fate, everything happening at the right time. But I was working for a firm here in Arkansas, and the conversation was being had that, once I was licensed, it was time for me to start moving up in the firm, taking more of an administrative role, more of and moving into a partnership and ownership role. And I was super excited and super happy about that. But series of fortunate or unfortunate events, whatever you want to call it. Um, the firm that I was working for ended up merging with another firm here in town. And I was just like, I really don't want to work for those guys.
Mm.
I've been around the block long enough. I know what is right for me and what's not, and that's not. And so I'm not going to do that. Um, and so I briefly went to work for a larger firm here in town, in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I was there for about 6 months, and had started to build up sort of a backlog of projects that I was moonlighting.
Mhm.
And I was working a ton of hours, sort of the daylighting or the moon.
You froze there, Jeremiah. I'm not sure what happened.
Threw up my hands and went to my wife. I was like, look, something's got to give. Either we let these projects go and I just, work full time, or, we take this chance and start our own business and see what we can do with it.
Yeah, could you
Um,
recap a little bit? There was a portion that froze. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was my internet, but yeah. So so you said you've been long enough around the clock, the block, and you
mhm.
knew how to do this. So what was that? Yeah, tell me a little bit about it.
Yes,
Froze up for a second, so I want to take a look at that. Yeah.
sure. So the firm um what that my old boss was merging with was one that I just, I sort of had seen how they operated. And, it's again, it's not a disparaging comment. It's something I was aware enough at the time to realize that that's not the kind of firm that I was going to be successful at.
Okay.
And so I didn't want to work there. And so I briefly went to work for a much larger firm here in town. It was sort of the, the corporate kind of corporate architecture firm, lots of principals, lots of production staff, multiple offices, et cetera, et cetera. And I was there for about 6 months and had developed this backlog of projects that I was moonlighting.
Yes. Okay.
And it was just, and that's where it was getting.
And was
It was
that
getting to
okay? Was the moonlighting okay with those firms? Or were you just doing, how do you do it? How ethically correct do you do
well,
it?
so I probably didn't do it the best way. I didn't tell them. I mean, everybody knows because I mean, everybody is even the some of the principals at that firm were doing their own side projects. Um, and
And those were projects that probably weren't necessarily big
they
enough to
weren't
bring to the firm, or like it
That's right.
wasn't, yeah, it was
Yeah,
more
they were
like,
like
yeah, yeah.
smaller residential projects. I had a couple of historic preservation projects going on at the time, which, was is still something that I'm incredibly passionate about.
Mhm.
But, I'm working 7 days a week, it's like 16 hours a day, like 80, 90 hours a week. And I was just exhausted. And I was like, told my wife, look, something's got to change, A or B, pick one. And she picked B, and that was 10 years ago. And we haven't stopped going strong yet. So I guess we did something right.
Oh yeah, that's really good. So essentially, by the virtue of the fact that the firm was merging, that already started kind of to set a path for you to say, this is the direction I have to go. But
Yeah.
yeah, and you already had enough work on the background that you could say,
Yep.
well, hold on, I mean, do you do the math? How do you come up with, because you know, I'll tell you a little bit about how I did it, right? I worked for many firms just like you, exactly like you. I don't think it was by design, but looking back, it looks like it was the same. Um,
Yep.
but like I did the math and I looked at the numbers and I was like, how much do I actually need to be able to feed me, my wife at the time, and DJ, who was a little one, and pay the mortgage, right? And I was like, what's the minimum, right? Like, what's the bare minimum that I could possibly do? And I started
Yeah.
doing Uber. And as I was doing Uber and Lyft, I was kind of trying to manage how to go about it. I wasn't making it, Jeremiah. I wasn't making enough when I was like jumping off to do this full time. I didn't know enough people. I didn't have any backlog. I had non-compete agreements. So it was really difficult. It was very shaky. I mean, I remember there was one job I was charging like 3K for. It was like a multifamily project. It was insane, insane. I was selling it for nothing. I was selling it for
Yeah.
nothing.
Pennies
Um,
on the dollar.
yeah, and like that was it for the month. That was it for like the 2 months, 2 months of that. So how
Hmm.
do you financially say, okay, because for sure, no matter how many jobs you had as a backlog, one, you probably weren't charging the same that you could have charged, right? Or I don't know how,
Hmm.
I don't know, I'm probably assuming things, but how was that? Because you were probably comfortable already. You were kind of on the senior path to management on those firms where you were working at, right? So,
Well, I would say I wouldn't say I was comfortable, but we were doing okay. So, my wife at the time, she was a stay-at-home mom,
hmm,
and so my income was it. So for us to take that kind of risk, you know, for a family of five was pretty big. Um, and but we did it. Now, so similar situation to you when I started out. I mean, when we moved to Arkansas, we moved here from Northeast Florida. We didn't know anybody. We didn't have any family. We didn't have any social contacts other than my boss, who I moved here to work for.
hmm.
And so we had only lived here for 2 years when I got licensed. And then I got licensed in April of 2014. And in November of that year, I worked my last day as a W-2 employee and officially started my own firm. So similar to you, I didn't have the social contacts. I didn't have the professional contacts. I didn't have the historical context, because, let's be honest,
Yeah.
this is Little Rock, Arkansas. It's still who you know, not what you know.
Hmm.
And but I was lucky enough that the projects that I had signed at moonlighting, I had enough of them that it basically guaranteed me 3 months worth of, as you said, that sort of the minimum, that I needed to just pay the bills and take care of my family for 3 months. And so basically the rationale was, all right, we're going to try this. I've got 3 months to finish these projects and get 3 months worth of additional income. And at the very beginning, that's kind of how I operated. I was like, all right, I've got 3 months to make 3 months. I've got 3 months to make 3 months. I've got three, and I just sort of kept snowballing that. And so,
You were good.
uh,
You were 3 months to 3 months. I was weekly.
yeah, I
So
always had, at the very beginning of my firm, I always had 3 months worth of salary and expenses sitting in the bank. And so I was always working on the next 3 months. Now, growing pains of a company 10 years later, taking on a partner and, taking on employees, that sort of changes the financial situation. I'm still always trying to work towards that, but we're definitely at a point where it's not quite feast and famine, but I would say we're pretty close, but we're hopeful that
yeah,
that's gonna catch
I'm,
up
I'm
really
not. I'm
quick.
not 3 months in. I wish I was. We're not 3 months. No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no. I wish we could have. We want to have 6 to 8 months or so. But we're
yeah.
not. We're not there yet. Contracts keep coming in, but yeah. So that said, all right. Where did the name come from? That's another one too, because I always wonder, like, okay, rogue architecture. You know, it's just like this kind of wild west name. Like,
Yeah,
what's the thought behind it?
it is. And I sort of love telling the story because so when I, moonlighting, I've had various sort of company names over the years, but I would say it wasn't really serious. It was sort of, they were play names. They weren't real company names. But when I made this decision to actually go and be full-time self-employed, I was like, okay, it can't just be Jeremiah Russell Architect, because the last thing that I ever want is my name, like my physical name on the work. Like I'm not here to leave my, personal stamp as a legacy on the architecture that we create. I want the company, I want the work that we do to be the legacy, not me as an individual. I want this to go beyond me. Like when I'm gone, I still want this company to be here. I still want people carrying on the sort of rogue architecture ethos. And so, when I sat down to sort of think about what I wanted to name my company, I started thinking back to my experience and that very intentional move to gain experience in different types of architectural firms. And what I realized is that, all of those years I was, some people call it bouncing around. I don't. I just call it research. In all of those years in research, I was basically making two lists. I was making a list of, okay, here are the things that you should do when you're running a firm. Here are the things that you shouldn't do. And what I was doing was I was taking the best and the worst from all of the places that I gained experience in, and I was using that to set up the culture of my own company. Even though at the time it wasn't there yet. I wasn't actively thinking about starting a firm until I actually did. And then I was like, oh shit, what do I do now? And so, when thinking about names, I was really trying to think of like an identity. And the word rogue has it actually has a dual definition. So it has sort of the colloquial definition of someone who is um it's synonymous with like pirate, someone who's like outside of society, or, doesn't conform to the rules, or, has this kind of, negative connotation, somebody who's not nice, who's not, I don't know, forthright or something. But then there's another side of the definition that simply says someone who operates outside of the normal bounds.
Mhm.
And that I really gravitated to, because I never wanted to have a firm that operated the way firms have always operated in the past. And that is, you get a client and you hire staff, and then you have to pay the staff. So you have to get bigger clients, but then you have to hire more staff. And, it sort of becomes this very rigid, inflexible thing that has to be fed and maintained. And so, like, when I started my firm, from day one, I, signed up for Dropbox, and I bought a laptop, and I bought a desktop, and I set up my firm to be flexible and nimble so that I could work anywhere at any time and be able to service my clients in the best way possible. Now, fast forward 10 years, and that has developed even further to where, we have these licenses in other states, and, I'm traveling and meeting with clients in DC and Virginia and Maryland, and even Massachusetts and Connecticut and
Mhm.
Florida, and, Texas and Colorado and California, all these other states that were licensed. And it's because from day one, I made that decision that I'm not going to be tied to a desk. I'm not going to be tied to an office. I'm not going to be tied to a city. The work that I do is not about me as a person. It's about our clients. But for us as a firm, it's about making sure that the work exemplifies the wants, the needs, the desires, the budget, the timeline of our clients. I think one of the worst things that could probably happen to me is someone, walk down the street, see a project that I designed, and say, "Oh, that's a rogue architecture project." I think that is probably the worst thing that could ever happen to me as a professional.
Yeah, so having a stamp wouldn't be really the thing. It's because then it means you got your way, not the client
That's right.
getting their way.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And for me, that's a disservice to the client, because
Mhm.
the work is, the design is ours, yes, but the building doesn't belong to us. It never
Mhm.
will, unless you become your own client, which, yeah, that'd be awesome. But
Mhm.
even then, you don't want, at least in my opinion, you don't want that signature to be so obvious,
No,
because each building, each site, each project type has its own challenges, has its own program, has its own, it needs to have its own identity. It should not be about the architect. It should be about the work.
yeah, so it's always about building from the lessons from the past to apply them in a different way with the new site and the new client, because you're not reinventing the whole
Absolutely.
wheel either, right?
Absolutely.
There may be some rogue best practices. It's just
Yeah.
best practices. You're like, I'm not gonna,
No,
you've learned things that didn't work, that
mhm.
probably work on a different context, and things that worked
Yep.
before that probably won't work either, here either. So
Absolutely.
that's good. Now I wonder how do you go about your first hire too, and that process? Like, how was that? How do you navigate that world? Like, I want to know more about those early moments in which you were like, okay, I got 3 months worth of work, but like I also have to go to Italy on a overdue vacation. I know too much of you, so I know. So it's like, well, and I know you can probably work with your glass of wine from Italy and some nice, grapes
Oh
and
yeah,
cheese. But
definitely.
I'm just wondering how do you go about that, navigating that, and setting where do I put my office? What's the best
Yep.
location? What could I afford? Like, how do you evolve through that process?
Oh, uh, the short answer to that question is carefully. Um, the longer answer is, so they say the first hire is the hardest. I would disagree with that. I would actually say the second hire is the hardest because you've learned lessons from the first. So the first hire, the first employee, legitimate employee that we hired was in year 6. And wait, is that right? What year is this? 2024. No, it was in year 5 or 6, and she was with us for 3 years.
But you had help like students and things like that throughout the process, right? Or no? That was the first hire. Like you didn't hire any interns, you didn't hire anything. It was just you. Oh
Yep.
my goodness. Huh.
Yeah. And I was averaging 20 to 30 projects per year.
Wow.
Yeah. And most of them weren't, they weren't small projects. I mean, they were custom design homes. They were, $1 million remodels and additions. I mean, some of the projects that we took on were huge. For just one person. But we were also blessed with some really great clients that, worked with us, made decisions quickly, and I mean, I would say to this day, our work speaks for itself. But that
For
first hire,
yeah, 4 years in or
yeah,
so.
4 or 5 years in, I was like, okay, it's time, because I was wanting to transition to more design, client development, administration, and kind of start handing off, more of the production and like, contract administration to someone else. So we interviewed a number of people. I think I probably went through 5 or 6 interviews over a couple of months. And the person that we hired was a recent college grad from the it was University of Kansas, Shock Jock Jayhawk or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, um, and she had a decent portfolio, but it was more like when I interviewed her, she was really passionate about affordable housing and like design, like efficient design and using design as a vehicle for social change. And I really gravitated towards that because that's something that I'm also really passionate about. And so she started working for us, and obviously fresh out of college, there's a lot you need to learn, there's a lot you need to know, but she was eager to learn, and she was learning a lot, and I was giving her a lot to do because she was able to kind of take some of the things off of my plate. I was able to go out and get more projects, and we were. Um, and unfortunately, it ended up, we had to let her go, not because of any financial reasons, but just the sort of work environment was getting, she wasn't producing as well as she was. And I think we were taking on a lot of very large custom single family homes at the time, and I think she was feeling a little run down designing these, what some might call McMansions, um, and just wasn't as excited and passionate about the work as she was when she started.
So you're already
um,
kind of answering some of my questions about also that process of how do you even part ways
yep,
with someone, right? It's hard to get the first hire. It's even harder to let go of that first hire
yep,
if
yep.
if they've contributed, meaningfully to the organization throughout the process, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really hard to let go of that first employee, because I think you do put a lot more emotional investment into it than is probably healthy for a business.
Mm-hmm.
But this, it's not good or bad. I think it's just an observation to be aware of. The second hire, though, I think is even harder. But that second hard hire, I guarantee you, is a lot easier to fire.
Yeah, I guess so. You're right. Yeah, because
So
at that
you
at
you
that point
you
you
sort of learn, yeah, you learn lessons on both sides of that fence.
yeah, no, I had to let go of one person once, and they made it easy for me. That's when we started making policies for like strike one, strike two, strike three kind of thing, like
Hmm.
reprimands or warnings, whichever way you want to call it. So I wrote them up. So they didn't really care much. So that made it like they basically fired themselves. So that was easy. That was very easy. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, but going back to that, I mean, Jeremiah, I've followed your career for quite some time now, and I've seen how you're able to manage the chaos that small firms have to go through. And I want to understand more of that. How do you, I mean, you did this for 4 years or 5 years without any hires, and you were doing invoicing, contracts, I mean, marketing, which is another point I want to touch upon at some point. All of that, like, it's still very active with AIA, still very
Mhm.
active with your local architectural community. Um, and you always ensure to get a great glass of wine. So, and a great cigar. So it's like, how how do you do all of that? How do you manage all of that? Are you working less nowadays than where you were working before? Like, how do you manage? Because doing everything. I mean, I've done it. It's not easy. So I want to know how you manage all of that. How do you navigate? How do you segregate and organize your life so that you can continue to produce work?
Yeah, my wife would probably say not well.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
I would tend to agree. So I think there's for and I'm about 100% positive you're going to agree with this statement. For people like us, for people like you and I who are dedicated not just to the profession but to the craft and to the business of architecture,
Hmm.
it's not a job, it's not even a career. Sometimes it does end up being a little bit of an obsession, and you give everything that you have to this industry, um, and sometimes everything else in life tends to be secondary.
Hmm.
And that's a real and present danger that I deal with. So, my oldest daughter, she's going to be 26 this year. My son's about to turn 16, and my youngest daughter is about to turn 15. And so, the one is sort of grown. She's out of the house. She's doing her own thing. But the other two, I have a very finite amount of time left with them before they leave the house and like go off to college and start their own lives. And I'm very aware of that. But at the same time, there's truly nothing that I love doing more than designing buildings and creating architectural expressions for our clients, and for the communities that we work in. So, finding a live work balance for me has always been a little bit of a, I don't know, it's like a catch 22. Like, I live and I work. Like it's all the same thing. Um, I don't know if that answers the question at all.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
not.
So essentially, what you're telling me
I would
is,
say I don't balance anything.
yeah.
I
So essentially,
just,
you intermingle it. I mean, I see you on some nice
yeah.
cocktails and parties. So I don't know. I mean, I do
And
see you with a nice bourbon in your hands
maybe
from time
maybe
to
the
time.
answer is maybe the answer is work hard, play harder. I don't know.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Now, you and I actually were part of this presentation for AIA New Jersey, where we were talking
Uh-huh.
about marketing and social media for
Yeah.
architects, right? So I want to know, how do you get started into that, right? Like, you've been very good at it, you've been consistent
Hmm.
throughout, um, and how do you even see that that was a thing that architects should do? That like, oh yeah, it's cool. Let's just start posting our work and let's become, and anybody watching this can go to, Rogue Architecture and
Hmm.
check the Instagram and check all of the posts of the day to day that you do. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool stuff. So tell me a little bit about that.
So interestingly enough, at the time, like it wasn't a, I don't think I well, no, I don't think I know. I didn't look around and sort of see that other architecture firms weren't doing this. I just had a desire to share the work that I was doing. And I think it was a little bit of being at the right place at the right time because Instagram had just started.
Mm.
Um, I mean, Instagram's only been around for, I don't know, I'd have to Google it to find out what year,
Yeah.
but I remember, this is how old I am. My wife and I met through MySpace, not even Facebook. Like Facebook wasn't even a thing yet. And
I had a MySpace too, by the way. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I probably still have a MySpace.
I,
What the
st- I,
login
st-
is, I
I
have no
still
idea.
do. I don't know how to get in it, but I still do. And I'm sure I have the best skins of
I
the
bet you
best
do. Yeah.
graphics.
Yep. But so, I wasn't looking around at other firms because at the time it was just me. I was doing some moonlighting and I wanted to sort of like share the work that I was doing. But for me, it was always much more about the process of architecture. Now I can definitely say that that's one thing that I've never really seen very well done in social media by architects even now. Um, a lot of architects they post about construction detailing or site visits, being on site and sort of translating a detail to the real thing. And I think that's done really well within the industry, but I think there's still this almost fear about um, talking about the process of design and how not everything has to be a polished image or a rendering or
Hmm?
a well lit finished photo. Like architecture is, design, even if it's not architecture, like whether it's graphic design or architecture or painting or sculpture, it's a messy process. And
Yeah.
there's always a point sort of at the middle where it just looks like a mess. And you're like, what the fuck am I doing? But then you kind of get over that hurdle, but it's through that process that we create. Um, and I've always felt a really strong desire to share the process, even when it's not pretty, it's not polished.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's been why rogue architecture specifically from a social media standpoint has been so popular is because we're not afraid to sort of be messy and uncouth
Mhm.
in within the social media space. Like I'm very honest about the work that we do. The finished product may be beautiful and functional and efficient and sustainable and like engages the community and all these things that yes, that's the bigger goal. But when it comes to social media, I think architects need to be more comfortable with being uncomfortable publicly. And I think that's something that I've always done very well. I'm very honest about the uncomfortable things about the business of architecture.
No, no, and I think that that speaks a lot about the story that you just mentioned of how you even got started, and how your life is about architecture in a way that even the trips you plan and how you navigate through your day to day. Architecture is always there, right? So why not capture all of that? And you're right. The process, we don't see much of the process, and I don't even think. I think it's because we've been preconditioned that the public wants to see the final product too. That's what magazines want. They don't want the
Shiny,
process. They
shiny,
want.
shiny, happy people everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So they're like, well, the process is ugly, right? We don't want the process. But hey, lately the process of getting in good shape has been something positive. I see a lot of people posting their gym photos and going through that process and that. So I guess people are warming up to the fact that hey, how we make that sausage, it's important too. Like how we make all of that's really, really,
No,
really important. And
Absolutely.
it's kind of
I
like
was
how the how becomes what, right? Like the how you make it
I
becomes
was
the what. Yeah.
I was just having this conversation with a contractor friend of mine the other day. People really do want to know how the sausage is made. They want to see the process. They want to know, because also at the end of the day, architects and let's just talk about the business of architecture for a second. We have a really hard time justifying our fees and the time that we spend on projects. And I think that's one of the reasons. They see the product, they don't see the process. And they don't understand, the average client doesn't understand the time, the effort, the expertise, the research and the knowledge that has to go into creating, just that one page that they see, and they're like, oh, well, I mean, you just clicked a few buttons and it, the computer spit it out for you. No, I spent 20 years learning how to make the computer spit that out.
Exactly. I was gonna,
Yeah.
the issue, and I guess we can vent over this. Probably at the AI conference next week, we're gonna vent about this.
Yeah.
Is the fact that we are in an industry that basically focuses on prevention. People don't care much about prevention, and they don't understand that prevention is the best medicine, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a very well designed, a very well put together set of drawings makes everybody's life easier, better, and it saves
Mm-hmm.
them a lot of money. So, and people don't
And
want to be,
time.
yeah, and people don't, well, because money is time is money, it's a commodity right there. So, but people don't even want to broadcast the fact that because they didn't have a really good architect or a really good team, they lost money. They don't even want to talk about
Yep.
that stuff, right? Like they hide it. But when
Yeah.
they do have one, it's almost like it's magic. It looks easy, but
Yeah.
it looks so easy. So we are on that prevention, and as you know, most people plan their day to day. They don't plan months and years and generations ahead. So they're always on the now. And architecture
Yep.
doesn't really work on the now. Architecture is working on
Yep.
20, 30, 40 years, right? In life cycle, right? So
Yeah.
we're not working on the now. We're working on the tomorrow, on the all electric solar panels. We're
Mm-hmm.
working on the future. And it's hard to put value on something that doesn't gratify you now, right? We are in the fast food industry right now, in the fast food everything, in the instant gratification for everything. So
Mm-hmm.
I find myself fighting that and teaching my kids that, hey, if you want generational wealth and if you want freedom, financial freedom, you have to start with all of these small decisions that you have to make
Yeah.
so that you can pave the way. But they don't
Yep.
buy it. They don't see it. Most of my contractor clients also don't see it. They're learning and they come back, and that's why they come back.
Yeah.
So I
There's
always
a
say, yeah, go ahead.
there's a great anecdote about that. So Frederick Law Olmsted, who was the landscape architect for Central Park in New York City, he was originally interviewed, eventually hired to do the Chicago World's Fair in 1892, I think is when it was. It was if you've never read the book, Devil in the White City, you need to. It needs to be on every architect's must read list. But so Frederick Law Olmsted, when he was interviewed for the commission, they told him he had 3 years to get it done. And when they told him that, he flat out refused to do the project. And he used used Central Park as the example, which took 25 years to establish like the design that he created, because they had to plant plants and they had to let them grow. Like it took 2.5 decades just for
Yeah,
Central
and the
Park to.
survival rate, they had to know how many were going
That's
to
right.
survive.
That's
It's
right.
yeah, it's something. Yeah.
And so, he flat out refused. He's like, it's impossible. Like, you're out of your minds. I'm not going to do this. He did end up doing it. And it was a success, at least from the Frederick Law Olmsted. I think he actually died not long after the Chicago World's Fair. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but maybe. Um, but from the attendance perspective, it was a monumental success because they saw that finished product. Now, is it what Homestead wanted it to be? Probably not. But it was that, that very messy execution that created this product that everybody saw, and it was lauded, it was celebrated worldwide. But I think from his perspective, he would have considered it a failure.
No,
So I
exactly,
think
because that's what
that
we're
duality that we work with.
we are on, that sort of, again, prevention, planning, seeing things that people cannot see prior to them happening. It's almost like magic, right? So well put together architecture looks like magic, but if we could show the effort behind it, as you do with the process, then people will start valuing the fact that, hey, that didn't just happen overnight. Not everyone that can buy Revit or Vectorworks doesn't necessarily automatically become a talented designer, right? Talented architect. That's not going to happen.
There's no easy button.
No, there is not. I do have a button that says that was easy. That's as far as it goes. Yeah, that's about it.
You like throw that at the interns when they, like, come on, get it done.
Yeah, right. So, but even that, right? The interns, you have to put so much love into them. So now I want to move away now. We understand how we started. We understand the role of marketing within your practice and how you balance or don't balance your life. But I want to know, Jeremiah, how are you positioning yourself for the future? I mean, do you think that the way you're doing architecture right now is going to be sustainable, working 24/7, mitigating all the situations? Do you think it's going to give you the reward that you want? You mentioned something very important, and is that soon enough you'll be an empty nester. So I want to know more about that, about how are you planning to I mean, if you say it's all perfect and you like it the way it is, then great, nothing to be changed. But if there is something to be changed, and if you don't think this is sustainable, you don't think you can keep up the way that you've been doing it, how are you positioning yourself so that you can have as much reward or rewarding life as possible?
Yep. No, that's a great question. So no, it's not sustainable. No human on the planet can continue working the way that I'm working right now. It's not healthy, nor should it be expected. I wouldn't expect it of my employees. The only reason I expect it of myself is because I have no other choice. But in terms of future planning, and I would even
you
call
do
it
have a choice, by the way. You do have a choice, and that's that right there. That planning that you're doing, that you're doing, right? So, because I don't want to, like, I don't want any of the followers of SFX and all of the YouTube channels to say, "Oh, there's no choice. I'm just a workaholic, and that's gonna be the end of it." So, exactly. What's the strategy? What are you doing so that you don't have to do this forever?
So right now we find ourselves in an interesting position where we had to let go a couple of interns due to non-performance, and so we're trying to replace them. It was kind of a series of unfortunate events that has led to this, but I would say the future-proof planning that we're doing is we're trying to identify some new interns and project architects to bring on for a long-term investment. So we're definitely taking some real time to interview and find the right person, not just a body to sit in a chair, or persons, because we do have multiple positions open. But we are also, my partner and I are actively looking for a third partner, and that's where the long-term planning comes into play. Because when my partner and I signed on with each other, we both understood that our firms had gotten to a point where it was never going to grow beyond ourselves, because there's only so much that we can do as individuals. As an individual business owner, I know you know this because you have partners. You as an individual, there's only so much that you can do in terms of administration, marketing, client development, travel, maintaining a family life, maintaining sanity. There's you as an individual are finite resource, but if you can take all of those same tasks and share them with another person, then, you have two people that can divide and conquer and then grow to the next step. The third person for us is really the key, because that third person will come in to take care of the real day-to-day management of the firm. That will free up myself and my partner to focus on design, client development, and marketing, basically. Like the three things that we're very good at. And I mean, obviously, I'm good at production. I'm good at contract administration, not necessarily things that I want to spend every day, all day doing. I also don't want to have to balance a checkbook every month either. So we're looking for people to put in those positions so that my current partner and I can focus on growing the firm, and then that third partner is someone who wants to focus on that sort of day-to-day contract administration, production, detailing, red lines, etc.
So now just wondering, and I know, we're closing soon, but
Mhm.
so right now, I guess your plan is how to identify better candidates for your firm, right?
Yep.
So I would invite you to start thinking about how can your firm be a better firm for those kinds of candidates too, just so that you can shift it around, right? I don't
Yeah.
know how you operate and how you run
No,
it,
that's
but I'm just thinking, in my mind personally, we have struggled getting talent ourselves too. We
Mhm.
have struggled throughout the process. We've been kind of hitting every niche. And what we are now on the, what is it called, when you're like stuck in the middle, like
Mhm.
there's a phrase for that, when the firm got to that point where it's just not, there's no traction to get to the next level, and it's like the people that
Yeah.
you started with.
You feel like you've plateaued.
Yeah, the people that you started with will not get you where you need to go. So some of them will get you to where you are, but you need to augment that with others too. And you don't want the ones
That's
that
right.
are raving, hardworking individuals to get burned out and then lose their
Yep.
steam. So
Yep.
you have to diversify the team in a way that then you can start having all of
Yep.
that. Now that said, okay, so how many people are you? Because it sounds like you're top heavy now. You were talking a lot about your partner, so you're
Yep.
top heavy right now. So it means that you have
Yeah. We've got
high.
two partners, one production staff, but we need two additional production staff, and then identify that third partner.
Yeah. So certainly, and that's another question too. How do you find your partner? And that's for another podcast, which we're gonna be having Jeremiah Russell and Darwin Fortuna coming up soon. But how do you identify the right partner? How do you identify the right balance and the right mix? Now, one thing I was hoping that I would hear from you too is, because you mentioned earlier how Rogue doesn't want to be or doesn't desire to be that firm that needs to grow to meet the needs of these clients, to then get bigger contracts, to then get more people to meet the needs of these new, more demanding clients, and become this machine that has to be fed. Kind of how you mentioned it, right? So, do you think that's so? What's the solution, right? Because I'm on that mode right
So
now. Every single day, brother, I am trying to feed that machine. Every move and every decision I make is try to feed that machine that keeps on
yeah,
going. That
there's
payroll comes every 2 weeks, and we have to meet it, and we have to make sure we're comfortable. It's not easy at
yeah,
all.
there's
It's a nightmare.
absolutely, yeah, it's very difficult as a business owner, and anybody listening to this who is considering starting their own firm, I think that's probably one of the most important things that needs to be considered within your decision-making process is, do you have the temperament to deal with that stress day in and day out? But what I would say is my goal for my firm is not to be that monster that needs to be fed, but rather have a culture and a list of clients that comes to us and trusts us to take care of their work, and we have the people in place to do the work efficiently and in a very profitable way. So I've said many times over the years that my firm is never going to be larger than 5 to 6 people. But the type of project that we are positioning ourselves to take on is that like 10 to $20 million multifamily project. And we want to position ourselves to do those types of multifamily and affordable housing projects, take on, 3 to 4 per year. Now, some of these are like multi-year projects, so you can, in terms of planning, you can stagger them out and stage them over time. But, I want to be a $3 to $5 million firm, but with 6 people in terms of our gross revenue. So from a salary standpoint, we're profit heavy, but that then allows us to invest in communities and build our own affordable housing and become our own client. We're never not going to service the clients that have, trusted us for the last 10 years to design their work. But, we do want to put ourselves in a position where our company can reinvest in the communities that we have been working in for the last 10 years, to build new housing models and to experiment, and try something new. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of housing models that are put out there are the same ones we've seen for the last 25, 30 years. They're just sort of recycling the same floor plans over and over again because they know they work, because they've been done so many times. But I think there's a market, and I think there's an appetite within the world for something new, to start to rethink housing in general. And I think that job needs to be done by architects and not by developers. Architect first,
I like
developer
that.
second.
No, and I think the architect needs to wear all those hats. So I'm gonna recap a couple of things, and I'm gonna ask you a question. I need you to answer with 5 points very quickly, very quickly.
Okay.
So the recap is essentially you want to build this firm that's super lean, super efficient, exploratorial, right? That tries to innovate within the field and reinvest itself within affordable housing, and becomes a pioneer where people are well paid, well rewarded, but because they're worth it. They produce exactly
That's right.
the best, right? It's la creme de la creme. So that's it. What are 5 things you would want to tell someone that's starting out, maybe Jeremiah 10 years ago, or 5 traits that you think make a difference, that people, any architect right now that's trying to open a firm should invest into? And I say the word invest because people don't see every skill as an investment. It is an investment. Every skill, every language, every tool is an investment. So tell me 5 things that you want to teach yourself.
I'm gonna go from 5 to 1 because the number 1 that I have in mind, I think, is really important. It's something that I've never really talked about, but I think we should talk about it more as an industry. So number 5, if you're thinking about starting a firm, want to start a firm, find an attorney you can trust. Somebody who specializes in the construction industry, but also in business law, because those are the 2 things that you're going to need the most. And it needs to be somebody that you can trust. It needs to be somebody that's not just transactional, but somebody you can have lunch with, you can have coffee with, you can go out for drinks with, somebody you like invite into your home. That person you absolutely need. Number 4, read everything that you can about architecture, about business, about people, especially.
Any books in particular that you're thinking about that come to mind that you're like, oh, those books are good?
Oh man, there's so many. I could make a list, but we don't have time. I would say some of the top business books that I've read are like the 4-Hour Workweek. The Good to Great was an incredible one. There's actually a book. What is it? Small Firm Management. It's oh gosh, I can't remember the author's name, but she's with the Charette Venture Group. Rita Klein, I think that's right. That's an excellent book for small firm management specifically. Let's see. Number 3, get out there, get some business cards, and go to be in your community, be involved. Go to gallery openings, go to AIA events, go to other industry professional events, hand out those business cards. Don't be afraid to shake somebody's hand, tell them your name, tell them what you do, be a self-promoter. Number 2, volunteer. That's something else that I firmly believe in. We as architects, we have an incredibly unique skill set that we bring value to our communities when we volunteer our time on city boards, city commissions, boards of adjustment, planning commissions, etc. Number 1, this is something that I have always believed, despite the incredible evidence to the contrary within the industry. Do not consider your peers competition. If you consider them competition, they will never help you, and you will never want to help them. And I think we as an industry need to get away from this idea that we're all competing with each other and instead realize that we're supposed to be working together to make our cities better, to make them more sustainable, to make them more inclusive, to make them more efficient, to elevate the quality of life in the places that we live, work, and play for everyone. And if we do that, everyone's going to make money because everyone's life is made better.
Wow.
So that would be number 1.
We close it right there. Really good. Oh my gosh. Amazing, Jeremiah. So thank you for being part of this, taking the time to be with me. I'm sure we're going to have great steak and great good food.
Cigars, bourbon, wine.
You got it. You got it. So how do we find you? Close out with that. How do we find Jeremiah Russell and Rogue Architecture? How do we know about you?
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about that. And, we'll close it away with that.
www.roguearch.com, Instagram, rogue.architect, Google Rogue Architecture Arkansas, and I'm going to be number 1 on the page. Yeah, you find us all over the social medias and the interwebs.
That's right. And we'll see you also as the chair of the 2025 SFX. So that's going to be amazing. Looking forward to it. We'll stay in touch. Thank you, Jeremiah, and we'll talk soon.
I can't wait.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks, Darwin.